Some of the questions are, who's for you and who's against you? And what are the things that tell you that is true? I'm thinking about the critical race theory, right? And a new question that we're asking is, do you think it's important to always tell the truth, even when it's difficult? Right? I mean, these are the kinds of questions that I think are really just opening up space for self-inquiry. And I also know it's having a transformative effect on the folks that are doing the outreach, as the two of you have alluded to. And Erin, you have shared some really amazing stories about how you've seen this orientation ripple into other parts of your life. So I wonder if you might be willing to share a few of those.
Well, I'll start with the one that was just between me and a total stranger who I'm sure now that I've got permanent placement in that district for elections, I will see him every year. But he and his wife, they were an elderly couple, very cute, like, couple goals. You hope that you're still walking in hand to go vote at that age in a relationship. And they were very sweet. His wife had mismarked her ballot. She had voted in for the same thing, the same person twice in one row, basically, and hadn't realized it. So we had to get her a fresh ballot. And so she went to to redo her ballot. She came back and we were having trouble getting it to go into the machine. And it was those machines, you just slide the paper in. We have all had it spit the ballot right back out at us because they are very, very finicky and fun to work with. So she was having a little bit of trouble getting ballot through. And he looked up at me and he said, these machines, I don't know. He said, they're very difficult to use, but I know we have to use them because of all the fraud. And I went, what? Because the top of the machine literally had Dominion stamped into it, which are the machines that supposedly were used in the fraud. So I was like, well, let's not mention that. And let's find a different way. So I said to her, I said, well, what kind of fraud are you talking about? You mean here in our county, in our district? And he said, well, yeah, it was all over the place. And I said, I don't think it was. Where did you hear that? And of course it was the regular media outlets that you would expect the voter fraud, the big lie to be carried on. And I said, well, these are the same machines that we used last year. We've had them for upwards of, my God, it must be like a decade now. I said, we really don't have the money in our county to just turn over all the machines. So these are the ones we used last time. He said, are they really? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, how come? Because one of our machines, we were lucky enough, and I say lucky as sarcastically as possible, to have one of our machines get a paper jam. You have to wait for those to be cleared. So they have to go to a different machine that sits behind the coordinators. That machine is called a BMD. It's used for people who have physical disabilities or challenges. They're visually impaired, so they need either assistance or a different way to fill out their ballot. And the great thing about it is, which is what I told them, I said, oh, that machine is amazing. I said, that helps people with disabilities of any kind continue to cast their ballot. They'll have their voice heard because the machine has all kinds of different equipment that'll allow it to happen. They said, well, then how come somebody at that district who's just, they don't have that problem? I said, well, that machine's broken right now. We have to wait for them to come and service it. I said, but the reason why that machine is so amazing is because since you have people with disabilities in every district, it has to be able to take every district's ballot. So if a machine breaks down, we can bring everybody over there for the time being. And so he started asking questions. Well, how do you know how many, how do they count the votes then? And so it just became a conversation. Thankfully, we didn't have a huge line behind him at the time, but it became a conversation of, okay, you ask me a question, I'll answer you as best as I know how. And then I would ask him, have you not seen it before? You've never noticed that behind the coordinators? Have you talked to our coordinators? Oh, I know the coordinators. I said, well, they've been here doing this for 40 years. I said, so you know them? Yeah, I know them. I said, well, do you think that they would direct people to the incorrect machine? And he was like, no, I really, you know what? I don't think they would. And the last thing I remember saying to him was that, everybody around here in this room, I said, I've only been here twice. This is my second election that I've done it. I said, but they've been here for 40 years, 40 years. And everybody here has been here since 5 a.m. And they'll be here for a total of 17 plus hours when the day is done. And we're here to make sure that everybody in our community is able to cast their ballot. Doesn't matter what party they're affiliated with, who they're voting for, because we won't know. We're here to keep the machines running. Make sure that no matter who walks in, how they vote, that they're able to leave having their voice heard. I said, so I don't know if you realize this, but especially for the experienced people who are working here, when you come in and say things like voter fraud, what you're doing is you're either saying to us that we are not capable of doing the job correctly, or that we're complicit in the fraud that you're alleging. I said, so I don't know if you understand how it feels to be someone who got up and got here at 5 a.m. and will not be going home until 10, 11 o'clock at night. That someone that you're here for thinks that. And he just stopped, and his wife kind of side-eyed him as we generally tend to do. And he said, I did not think of that. I didn't think of it that way. And I didn't mean for it to be that way, but I can see that, when you say that, you're talking about the people around you. And that's probably the way a lot of them would take it. And he said, so, well, thank you for your time. And he went over to the coordinator's table and told them that, it was, that I had done a great job helping his wife, and which was all wonderful. But the thing I kept thinking was, I just had a human text conversation. I just brought that over into the real world. And it was really satisfying, because I feel like people, especially in that demographic, talk to each other a lot. And I was hoping that experience would get carried over into his everyday life. And that if he heard his friends say it, he would say, well, I spoke to someone at the, when I was casting my ballot, and they told me all these great things about the BMD, and just kind of, one little pebble starts that ripple, and hopefully that would make a difference.